guys, it's Amy. Thank you so much for joining me today. I hope you're all having a wonderful day as always. So today I want to talk to you about Cheyanne Harris, who was convicted of first-degree murder for the awful, torturous death of her 4-month-old baby boy named Sterling. From the first day of the trial on January 29, 2018, Cheyanne Harris's heartless attitude was very obvious to see, as well as her attorneys that appeared to share an attitude that went hand in hand with that of Cheyanne Harris. Now, it is unclear whether she purposely killed her own son or if she was just neglecting him to the point of his death. But as the trial went on, she went from having this pretty face to letting her rage begin to show, little by little, day by day, until you could finally see her absolutely cracking as people talked about what had happened during the time that she spent with her 4-month-old baby, and it was clear that she was truly an evil person. If you watched this trial and learned the full story of Sterling Cohen's short life and death, then I am very sorry, because it was really one of the most disgusting and disturbing cases I've seen in some time. This was a case of unbelievable neglect, and the way this poor little infant little boy was found is incomprehensible. I watched this 24-year-old woman sit in this courtroom with this pissed off attitude, this angry face, a lot of the time showing her immaturity by basically throwing a tantrum, particularly when the prosecution talked about her. You could see her shaking her head, punching her leg, just acting ridiculous when we already know that you let your baby die and you didn't give a shit about your baby, and sitting there acting like a fool is not helping your case. So I don't know what she was thinking. She clearly doesn't think. I honestly do not think I saw any remorse from this woman. And the only time she seemed to have any resemblance of sadness or looking like she might have actually been possibly shedding a tear was when her mother was on the stand, and she was, nodding her head, yeah, that's true, blah, 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 when her mom said certain things. But it seemed like she was more upset that her mom had to be up on the stand testifying, and her mom would kind of sound like she was choking up a little bit, and then Cheyanne would show some bit of sadness or whatnot. But as far as remorse for the baby, nothing. I didn't see anything slightly showing the slightest bit at all of remorse from this girl. She looked annoyed. She looked pissed off and annoyed to have to be there. Like, you were ruining her day making her sit in this courtroom, when I say throw her ass away. She can go to prison for life or kill her ass. I would be okay with that. Anyway. Cheyanne Harris and Zachary Koehn introduced baby Sterling to this world in May of 2017. But he was not born in the normal fashion that most are accustomed to. Cheyanne Harris was actually surprised to find that the baby's head started to come out while they were at a friend's house, and she was in the bathroom. She was then brought into the bathtub where she delivered the baby without any medical people there. However, the ambulance did arrive shortly afterwards, and baby Sterling did end up being fairly healthy, although having to stay in the hospital for a bit longer than usual. However, after only 4 months, things did change. So what happened with this baby? Well, in all honesty, I'm surprised that we even found out what happened to this baby, because it took so long for them to realize the baby was dead, it seems, and I'm surprised the police were even called. However, the police were not called by Cheyanne Harris, the mother. They were actually called by the father. but it was a very long time after the little boy had died, and a long time after he had been treated like he didn't exist, basically. He was found in a bedroom. I guess you'd call it a bedroom, presumably his room that he stayed in all the time. He was found where he slept. It wasn't a crib, it wasn't a bed, not even a playpen or a pack and play or anything like that. No, little Sterling, 4-month-old baby Sterling, was found sitting in an electric swing that was facing the wall, practically up against the wall in this bedroom, facing the opposite direction of the door. He had been stuffed into this bedroom. He was stuffed into this room like he didn't exist, while the rest of the family, the mother, Cheyanne Harris, the father, whose name I cannot remember right now, and their little girl, who was about 2 years old, and she was being taken care of, apparently. I guess they loved her enough to feed her. They went on as a 3-member family, sharing a bedroom and moving about the rest of the house, living a fairly normal life. But they didn't care enough about the baby. So when the police showed up at the house, they found that the rest of the family, other than the baby, obviously, was just standing outside. No emotion, didn't care. The woman who testified as a first responder was so choked up she could barely testify. They show video of her in the room, and she's devastated at the sight of this baby. She testified that when she showed up, she gets a call, she's expecting to maybe help resuscitate a baby that got hurt or an accident or who knows what happened, but she did not expect to show up and have the family greeting her outside, if you want to call it greeting. She walked over asking, "Where's the baby?" And the father of the baby directed her to the room. And when she got into the room, she was initially looking for a crib, and there was no crib. And then she realizes that that poor baby is sitting in this electric swing. And when she sees him, she is probably forever traumatized. She is devastated. She's devastated. Little Sterling, supposedly Cheyanne had fed him the night before, and the next morning she realized, she hadn't heard from him in a while, hadn't heard him crying or anything like that. So she went in to check on him. She found him dead and went into the bedroom and supposedly started, as far as what, they say, she started freaking out, crying that he's gone, the baby's gone. And the husband was like, "What do you mean he's gone?" So he went and checked on him and found him dead in the swing. Didn't take him out of the swing. No one bothered to take him out of the swing to see if he was okay, to try to resuscitate him. If it was my baby and I saw that this had happened to him, I'd be freaking out. He'd be out of that swing immediately. I'd be trying to save him. I would do whatever I possibly could. You would be doing CPR. You would be giving CPR to that child, trying to figure out what's wrong with him. However, I suppose if you had looked at the baby and seen what he looked like, and the fact that even though he was 4 months old, he weighed nothing and looked like he hadn't been fed in who knows how long, even though she said she fed him the night before and changed him and everything had been fine. She'd been keeping track. This is like 1 o'clock in the afternoon, and she's being asked when she last saw the baby alive, and she's saying that she had changed him and fed him the night before. Now let's just think about that. For anyone who has a baby or knows of babies and how they live and how they thrive, saying that you last saw your baby at 9 o'clock the night before is the stupidest thing I've ever heard. I'm sorry. That makes no sense. Do you know how much time you have to put into taking care of a baby just on a daily basis? It's 1 o'clock in the afternoon and you haven't seen your baby since 9 o'clock the night before? It's the most idiotic thing I've ever heard in my life. You're clearly not taking care of this child if you don't realize until, 1 o'clock in the afternoon or so that your 4-month-old baby is dead. And if she fed Sterling the night before like she swears she did, then why did they find this one bottle on the floor in his room that had crusty, old, chunky formula, and just one clean one in the cabinet where the food was kept. These are the only two people that Sterling Koehn could rely on in order to survive, and they failed him tremendously. The Assistant Attorney General stated that this baby actually died of diaper rash, which is completely unheard of. And the first responding EMT, Tony Frederick, described that the couple showed no emotion, and when the father led her to the dark, hot bedroom where the baby's body was, he continued to show no concern at all. But Tony was devastated to see that the baby's eyes were wide open in a blank stare. Tony went on to testify, and it was apparent from the second she got on the stand that this case still haunted her. She was visibly shaken and had to try to compose herself, taking several deep breaths before even being able to give her name. She explained that she had asked to be taken to the baby. Zach brought her to the room, and she described how dark and still it was with no airflow. She told him to get the lights on, so he did so as he mumbled something and left the room with no concern at all for his 4-month-old baby that sat in an electric swing, motionless and stiff with a dead stare, partially hidden under piles and piles of blankets and clothes, as well as clothing that lay underneath him, presumably to sop up the urine and feces that this unloved, uncared-for baby had been sitting in for weeks. Tony was a seasoned nurse that had worked in an emergency care unit and had witnessed many sick babies and deaths, yet this one case still hurt her heart a year later. Tony wasn't the only one that was devastated by this case. Upon the trial, they had several people that testified and could hardly control their emotions. This was a mail carrier that had happened upon the scene. She described what she had seen, which was a couple that didn't appear to care that their child had suffered a horrendous, tragic, tortured death. And then, after the autopsy, it becomes very clear that the baby was dead well before the supposed 9 o'clock at night check-in. And he had been starved. He had not been cleaned. He had not had his diaper changed in weeks. He had been sitting there, probably alone, with a dirty diaper, with urine all over him, with bugs all over him for weeks. So long that he had wilted away to nothing, basically rotted away in the back room by himself facing a wall with rotting feces in his diaper, so bad that it had turned into a sludge and had connected to his skin. Sterling Koehn, this beautiful little 4-month-old baby, had once had these big bright eyes, this adorable smile, and he had been left to rot in this swing that was filled with feces and urine, leaving his skin marked with the urine from the seat. And they had piled up clothes to apparently sop up the urine and feces that was dripping down from his swing. And they didn't care. They let this poor boy rot for up to 14 days. This couple that didn't care about anyone but themselves and possibly their 2-year-old baby girl. And even after Sterling Koehn had died, this was one of the Facebook pictures that they put, that they were loving the clean life. They loved the clean life while Sterling Koehn had been left in filth, left in dirty, disgusting clothes, covered with flies and maggots that he was alive to feel on his clothes, on his skin, crawling around in his diaper, feeding on the feces that had caused E. coli, bugs that were all over the blanket, on his little clenched fist. It was the most disgusting thing that anyone had probably seen in quite some time. And yet these two people tried to say that they were unaware that this boy had been left starved, sick, and dirty for 2 weeks. 2 weeks. He had died 8 hours prior to the 911 call, but he had been alive for around 14 days, being tortured by all of this, by starving and having bugs crawling on him and feeling dirty and disgusting. He was alive for all of that. I can't imagine how that would feel. Gnats were flying around him. Gnats were on his clothes. When they opened up the blanket that was on him and the coat, gnats flew out. Yeah, he had a coat on and a blanket on. And mind you, it was warm. There were fans in the other room, a couple other rooms, their bedroom. He had nothing in there. The window wasn't open, and she had the heat up even higher in that room than the other rooms because, as she put it, as Cheyanne Harris, the great mother that she was, put it, that she thought that he needed to be kept warm. So she had extra clothes on him. She had a blanket on him. She had a coat on him. He was just covered in blankets and whatnot. And when you pulled it away, he was just a shell of a little baby. And there was nothing there because, again, he'd been starved to death. He hadn't even been checked in on. This poor kid, not only was he not getting fed, he wasn't getting changed, he wasn't getting cleaned, he wasn't getting any love. Nobody was picking him up. Nobody was playing with him. Nobody was acknowledging that this baby existed. This was the most insane thing I've ever heard. And when the father asked about whether he had played with the baby, he said, yeah. Oh, yeah, he totally did. And his understanding of playing with his own little baby boy was that he would go in there. He had gone in there, and Sterling had reached his arms up for him, and the dad had put his finger out so that the baby could touch his finger and kind of swung his finger around a little bit. He was holding his arms out to you so you would pick him up and love him and take care of him. I mean, come on. It's disgusting how he turned out because of these awful people. It seems to me that the reason that this girl was not taking care of her son, because like I told you, they had a 2-year-old's daughter together as well. And the 2-year-old daughter was being taken care of. I mean, I don't know how great she was being taken care of, but she was being fed and cleaned. They clearly had food. They had a fridge of food, and they had baby formula and bottles in the cabinets that still had stuff in them. They had snacks that seemed mainly for the 2-year-old that the family clearly seemed to love more so, especially because the father loved this little girl and they considered her their little princess, unlike the baby. When people went into the house to take care of the baby, when the authorities went into the house, paramedics and the first responders went into the house, they saw the little girl. She was wearing an Easter dress. She was dressed up. She was clean. She was chubby. She was fed enough that she was chubby while this baby sat in a corner of a room alone in the dark in the heat and died. They let this baby rot in another room. It was stated that Cheyanne's husband didn't believe that the baby was his, and that seems to have a lot to do with it. Cheyanne was obsessed with her husband, constantly calling him, wanted to be with him all the time, and he was out on the road as a truck driver. So he was there on and off, and a lot of the time he was sleeping. But he didn't believe that this baby was his because he said it didn't look like him. So let's look at these two guys. Look at the baby and look at the father that didn't believe he was the father. You can see the two of them with the eyebrows, the mouth, the dark hair and skin. They do look alike just because Sterling is so much more adorable than Zachary Koehn ever could have been. They are definitely related. They did do a DNA test and find out that, yes, he is in fact the father. They don't look alike. These two don't look alike. What baby was he looking at? Well, we know he wasn't looking at his own baby because it does look like him, and he never took care of it. So how would he know what his baby looks like? I'm sorry, it's disgusting. I'm disgusted. So when the first responders went in, they could clearly smell the death in the room, and they didn't understand how you could possibly not know that the baby had been dead for some time because the smell of death is really strong. But when they asked about that, the father said that there were dirty diapers piled up that Cheyanne had just left there that he was upset about. So he just threw those out and just assumed it must have been the dirty diapers that made it smell bad. It had to have smelled throughout the entire freaking house. And I mean, the baby has got sewage basically in his diaper for at least a week or so. Well, what the hell is wrong with these people? It's disgusting. And she had put air fresheners underneath the swing. They said that, oh, the 2-year-old must have been playing with the air fresheners and that's how it happened. Or maybe Cheyanne grabbed an air freshener for something and left it there without realizing or something. It was a mistake. First of all, they said the 2-year-old wasn't even allowed to go in that room. The 2-year-old got jealous of the baby. So if Cheyanne was holding the baby and the 2-year-old saw it, she'd get so upset that she would try to like beat on the baby. So Cheyanne stopped picking up the baby because she didn't want to have the baby get hurt by the 2-year-old. What the hell? What is that? I don't even know what is worse out of what I just said. So we'll just leave it at that. It's ridiculous.
Maybe the reason no one could hear Sterling crying was because there was a mattress up in front of the wall, as well as couch cushions and lots of other things. There was a garbage pail that had recently been cleaned in the bathtub, along with some other cleaning supplies that had been left out, which I found very strange because although several of the family rooms seemed to be fairly cleaned and maybe recently cleaned, they didn't seem to have a problem piling up a bunch of clothes and junk in Sterling's room, including all of this stuff here. Clothes not for Sterling, but for 2-year-old Nala, as well as, of course, the air fresheners, some random pipes and soda bottles, and lots of crap just sitting around in his room. So why was there a cleanup?
Another crazy aspect of this case was when they had the husband's best friend testify. We learned at the trial that after the fact, maybe before the fact of this baby dying, she had been having an affair with him. She started having a relationship with him. At the time of the trial, they were in a relationship. I don't know how that goes. I mean, they were in a relationship by what? By letters? I don't know. But
we could see Cheyanne Harris looking at the witness as he walked by, basically seeming to check him out and turn her neck as far as possible to watch him walk all the way out of the courtroom, while the attorneys she had seemed to be acting just as immature as Cheyanne Harris. And then it looks like her female attorney turned and talked to her about how she was behaving, at which point they both looked upset and as if they were having their own little tantrums. Possibly because of what he had said during his testimony.
The best friend of the husband had been to their apartment several times, had seen Cheyanne taking care of the 2-year-old, had seen Cheyanne playing with the 2-year-old. He didn't know there was a baby in that house. He never knew there was a baby in that house. He knew that there was meth in that house because Cheyanne Harris was a meth addict. Her husband supposedly only did meth because he was a truck driver and needed to stay awake. But she became a meth addict, so she was doing meth all the time. The new boyfriend, the best friend of the husband, he did meth with her in the house, in the bedroom, because we didn't want the 2-year-old to see that they were using meth or anything like that. So they were being responsible with their meth use. But he did not know that there was a baby in that back room. So that baby was probably just stuck there for the majority of its 4 months on this earth until a horrible, horrible, terrifying death. We don't know how bad it was for a 4-month-old to go through that ordeal where he's just sitting there wanting to be loved, but it's terrible. The defense tried to use their meth use as a defense.
They brought in expert defense witness Dr. O'Hara
to say Cheyanne, she wasn't in her right mind. She didn't know what she was doing. She was using meth that messed up her head. She was depressed. It made it hard for her to take care of her kids. She couldn't handle it. She was so depressed. She was alone. She didn't have the help of the father because he was off on the road all the time, and when he was home, he was sleeping.
However, when the prosecution had their chance to question the doctor and ask him about Cheyanne's inability to be a parent to her children, things began to change.
That was kind of proven incorrect and to be bullshit by the prosecution because they had a 2-year-old that was fairly well taken care of. I mean, I can't imagine she was taken care of all that well, but she seemed to be loved. She certainly didn't die in a corner in a dark, hot room like the 4-month-old did.
And the defense expert had a very laughable testimony with regard to these questions. Quite literally, he began laughing, and after he humiliated himself by laughing, he ended with a face of shock and confusion, which then carried over to the defense table as the attorneys looked first quite surprised by what he was or was not saying, and then they seemed to be angry and discussing what they should do amongst themselves. As Cheyanne also had a confused face, she began adjusting herself in her chair, moving up and down, definitely looking very angry by the expert's testimony. And you can see that the defense attorneys were discussing where they could go next with this. And it was all just a very big disaster for the defense attorneys, and Cheyanne Harris. Because this defense expert had no choice but to concede with the prosecution's argument. She told O'Hara she didn't want to change Sterling's diapers, didn't want to hear him cry, didn't want anything to do with him.
This baby was a distraction for Cheyanne from her life with her husband. She wanted the 3 of them to have this perfect little family, and she did not want to include Sterling in it. And even when she was questioned by the police, when they asked questions about Sterling, she reverted it back to the 2-year-old. She didn't talk about the baby. She didn't give a shit about the 4-month-old baby. She didn't care about Sterling. She only wanted to talk about herself, her husband, and their daughter. That's all that mattered to her. She didn't want to be stuck in that apartment anymore. She wanted to be on the road with her husband and her 2-year-old daughter. And she probably would have just left that baby in the back room to die alone when they went off on the road. But instead, she let the baby stay alone in the room to die while they were right in the next room. She didn't feed him. She didn't change him. She didn't clean him. She didn't love him. She let him die in the back room. And after this all happened, ironically, when this kind of happened because she was so obsessive about her relationship with her husband ended up blaming her and saying that it was her fault and that he had put his trust into the wrong person, assuming that he could trust her to take care of his baby, which again is kind of bullshit because supposedly he didn't believe the baby was his and he didn't give a shit about the baby either. So she'll be in prison for life, hopefully, but she should have been put to death. I think this is a horrible case. I don't care if she was depressed. I don't care if she was on drugs. I don't care what the reason is. If you can't take care of your baby, have someone else take care of the baby. This is just another terrible case, and at least there was some justice because both mother and father of this poor little baby were sentenced to life in prison. And now their little daughter, who they seem to at least dote on in comparison to the baby, is now not in their family's custody at all. She's been put in foster care. So now we can only hope that the 2-year-old daughter will be able to turn her life around, because foster care is also a terrifying situation. Hopefully she finds a good home, a loving home, and people that will take care of her and love her the way that she should have been loved and the way that that baby should have been loved. So that's it. That's the story of Cheyanne Harris. I didn't want to get into a lot of detail with this case, but I did want to bring it to everyone's attention because I'm so sick of seeing all these parents killing their children, and this is just another one of those cases, and I want it to end. So that's it for today. Let me know what you guys think in the comments section. Please like, share, and of course subscribe if you haven't done so. And thank you guys, as always, for all of the support. And I hope you have a great day. All right. Thank you guys. Bye.